enjoying the AV team so much. So I always say it's like marketing. I'm the end product. But the truth is all the hard work happens behind closed doors. And there's a whole team at the bench and at FHS that puts it together. And also the AV team that's there. So I am a product of everything that's happening around you. So a round of applause, please, to everybody that really puts this together. I'm quite impressed with the music the AV team is utilizing. It's so African. I love Fela Kuti. We're now going to go into a fireside chat, rethinking conservation for a sustainable future. We certainly need a sustainable future. I'm looking that side at our moderator, and they are prepared. I'm going to welcome him back on stage, and you all know who he is. Please help me warmly welcome on stage Jonathan Worsley, Chairman and CEO of The Bench.
Great, thank you, Tani. And can everybody thank Tani for doing such a great job? Tani, you are amazing. You're keeping us on schedule. We're only a few minutes late. You've been bringing everybody closer to the stage. It's been a great conference. It's great to be here. It's great to be in Cape Town. I've got a great session right now. I'm really excited by it, about rethinking conservation for a sustainable future. And I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Morné de Plessis, who's the Chief Executive Officer of WWF South Africa. He's been leading WWF South Africa since 2007 and serves on the global and continental WWF advisory bodies. He's authored and co-authored 50 scientific papers, 2 books, and was awarded the National Research Foundation's First President's Award in Animal Sciences. His strategic focus is climate resilience, carbon reduction, green energy integration with strong influence over national policy. And you're also a passionate orchid hunter, I believe. Is that right?
That's right.
And you founded how many species?
I'm still looking.
Still looking?
Yeah.
But I think it's something like 100.
Yes, well over 100.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Please welcome
Thank you.
Dr. Morné.
Thank you.
Dr. Morné, if you can join me here. My second panelist is now actually part of the family, which is great. Mark Reed, I'll get onto that in a second, but he's chairman of Everard Reed Gallery, which operates in Joburg, Cape Town, London, and Franschhoek. And he's reshaped it into a contemporary art powerhouse. Now, why is Mark here? Well, he's been chair of the WWF South Africa's board. He's been involved extensively working with Richard Leakey, for example, in East Africa as well. He's a founding trustee of the Rhino and Elephant Foundation. He's a renowned naturalist and a walking botanical encyclopedia, and I know that firsthand as well. But he sees art as a conduit for environmental awareness and curating wildlife-focused exhibitions and collaborating with botanical artists. But most importantly, we have our grandson here today, sitting up at the top. Our grandson is oh no, there he is, right there. 7 months old. Sorry if he's probably going to be asking all the questions. So this is fun. So my son Ollie and your daughter Fran, and we've got Christine, Fran's mother there as well. But they met 15 years ago at FIFA World Cup and married 2 years ago roughly. So it's nice to have you back here. Mark, we better get on because we don't have much time. But I can call you family.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's
Thank you. We're nice sitting over
yeah,
here.
you sit in the middle. So,
Hello, Morné.
Hi, Mark.
So what a great discussion. Do you like my socks?
Love them.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
After the cricket.
No, mine are dull compared to yours.
Well,
Wow,
we work on
that's
that here.
unusual.
We have competitions, sock competitions, which is great fun. So let's get right into it. The WWF Living Planet Report 2022 showed that vertebrate wildlife populations declined by an average of 66% since 1970, with some sources citing 76% decline, and here in South Africa, the Cape vulture has declined 60-70% since 1992. So we've got poaching, we've got over-tourism, we've got pollution, and we've got climate change. Morné, just how bad is it? Because tourism in Africa, which this conference is all about, doesn't exist without wildlife.
Yeah, exactly. And we can come up with lots of examples of things sliding backwards very, very badly. And if we just here in Cape Town think about the African penguin, in 1900, if there were 100 penguins, there'd only be 3 of those left. So a 97% decline in that population. So we've got our work cut out for ourselves across Africa, but certainly in areas that are slightly more developed, the pressures are huge. But of course, you know, we could relate sliding stories, backward sliding stories, but there are many gains that are made. I think we should rejoice in the fact that Africa, as a continent, is unmatched in terms of the natural splendor that it presents, the opportunities. South Africa, in particular, ranks among the top 10 most biodiversity-rich countries anywhere in the world. And that basically means that there's a huge concentration of evolutionary diversity of organisms that occur here, that occur nowhere else. And those provide opportunities for people to come and experience and see. I think the point that one sometimes forgets is when we talk about African experiences, we talk about African safaris, we forget that Africa is also the place where people from Africa live. So this is the continent in which we Africans live, and there are lots of challenges in terms of development that has to go hand in hand with whatever we're talking about here.
For sure. So at WWF, what are you most proud of with your tenure there?
Well, you know, a grandfather loves all his grandkids equally, I suppose. I would say that just in terms of this audience, WWF in South Africa has had a 20-year program on the expansion of the range of the black rhino. Black rhinos are particularly rare. White rhinos a little bit more common, although not too common. But black rhino numbers have grown despite the intensive poaching levels that we've experienced since about 2008. And in the Black Rhino Range Expansion Program of WWF, we've seen those numbers grow quite substantially. And that's usually in partnership with the private sector, where new populations of black rhinos are created on the land that is managed and owned by the private owners as well as communities. And that's the nice blend, getting a private community partnership with the state.
And do you find the hotel industry as well? Do they help and sort of keep those animals in a safe space as well?
Well, you know, the hospitality industry is obviously very dependent on the goose that lays the golden egg. So one would like to believe that the hospitality sector is acutely aware that it cannot just draw on what is there, but also has to give back. And I think there are many examples of strong community programs around hospitality enterprises in Africa.
Well, Mark, maybe we can just move on to you, because you've been an investor in the Great Plains, and they've got fantastic, successful conservation models. So give us, in your mind, from your experience with Great Plains, what does success look like?
Seeing this as a Africa-centric meeting, just a conservation project, to my mind, that's successful in Africa has a layer on it that is in addition to a conservation success story pretty much anywhere in the world. I was listening with great pleasure to the previous speaker, one of them, Mr. Gardner, about starting up conservation projects in Patagonia and all over the world. Africa has an additional challenge to anywhere else in the world. It's got pluses, like you couldn't have this curious term called a game reserve, can only be applied to an area of wilderness in Africa where people want to go. You can't have, for some reason, one couldn't think of a game reserve in Europe or a game reserve in Asia. Game is defined by the number of species of large herbivores, mammalian herbivores, or predators in Africa. And so we get this wonderful term called a game reserve. But our biggest challenge here, in addition to all the other hopeful success stories of increasing biodiversity and the attendant tourism, is our need in Africa to establish a sustainable and ongoing and building relationship with the large population of people around these areas. If one looks at what are called highly successful conservation projects in Africa, they only are highly successful in the long term if they have a very fine relationship with the surrounding population of people. And those that fail in that will fail, in my opinion, completely as conservation projects.
Right. So how does that work?
Well, I think right from the outset, if one's going to go in and get involved in increasing the biodiversity and connecting it with its tourism potential, you've got to, right from the beginning, include the aspirations of the people around, and not be the days are gone where one can tell them what's good for them. One's got to start to involve oneself with the education of youth, the emancipation and empowerment of women. All of those things will go towards giving you a chance of having longevity as a perceived conservation success story. For instance, last year, myself and Christine spent some time with Greg Carr in Gorongosa. And this was South Africa's, I think, second oldest national park, I think after Shishlui, and then became a killing field due to the CIA and the KGB battling it out through their proxies in the middle of Mozambique. And one couldn't go out and plant sorghum or anything at all but without being blown up or machine gunned. It was a complete collapse of everything from that humans hold dear.
So what is Greg Carr doing that's transformational?
He went out. Well, he came and decided that this was the place that he wanted to spend his billions, and resurrect it as an entity that had some sense ecologically, and also that could attract people, which gave it some kind of commercial sustainability. But he realized right up front, as he said to us, the important thing was to try and build schools so you ended up having more good school teachers than good game rangers. Right. Because if you've got thousands of game rangers telling people what they shouldn't do, they're never going to love the place. Rather have wonderful school teachers trying to teach people about the extraordinary beauty of the place they live and what the density of the dawn chorus of birds will mean to future generations, and how many wonderful, wealthy people from throughout the world will want to come and visit the place, and allow them to therefore practice their agricultural produce there. And it tremendously affected me, that one liner really, he wants to have more school teachers than game rangers.
So a real focus on education. Morné, you're doing quite a bit on the whole education front as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we do. So if Jonathan, if I can just touch on giving another example, and this is sort of not putting any cotton wool around how conservation is often viewed through a Western lens, but WWF has been involved in Namibia for many, many years, in fact, over 3 decades, in a conservancy conservation program. Conservancies are these communities, communal lands that have been brought under some form of conservation. Now, initially, there was a lot of conflict between communities and their livestock and wild animals. And we're talking about over 50 conservancies, so the sample size is very big. And in the beginning, the communities battled to understand that there was value to be had from the animals that were, the wild mammals that were occurring on their lands. And so in the beginning, in order to get them to understand that there was value, there had to be consumptive use of the animals. So meat was distributed and sold as a result of it. It wasn't very cash rich, but it started turning the flywheel. Within 6 years is the sort of pathway. You find that you have a build-up of animal numbers that is sufficient to provide a tourism product. And so WWF, with its partners, put together community-based tourism initiatives. These are not high-end. Some of them have upgraded into high-end tourism facilities. Most of them are pretty ordinary, little bit hand-to-mouth kind of tourism enterprises. And that was very job-rich. There were lots of beds to be made and vegetables to be grown and so on. And so over time, you found that this kind of complementary model that initially the flywheel had to kick in with something that we would say is not conservation into something that provided then sufficient densities of animals for people to be viewing and coming to visit and to pay. I think extremely powerful model. And so when we talk about education, there's nothing like practical examples of things like this to educate, because people learn from that.
Yeah, and so just elaborating on that particular point, I mean, it seems like the industry, the hospitality industry, is learning, and we're probably getting better when it comes to conservation. But you can see, as the previous session, you've got the big global brands now coming into this market. What hasn't worked well, and what can we learn from that, from conservation projects and the industry?
Yes. So I think what hasn't worked, and this is purely a personal perspective, is when we've tried to impose a tourism product onto a system that is alien to that system. And I think our previous speaker, we heard talking of making something that's relevant to that particular enterprise. So for example, I was just sent this morning a video clip of a lion pride on the Skukuza golf course in Kruger National Park this morning at sunrise. And you wouldn't think of a golf course inside a national park. Now, maybe Skukuza got away with it, but that might not be the typical, that's a peripheral, you'd generally expect it outside the park, etc. So I'm saying inappropriate developments where you do a Disneyland where you should have an African safari is where you take the authenticity away. There may be money to be made, but it's not in the interest of conservation,
so
in my opinion.
This is where you have the gap, isn't it, between governments, the public and the private sector. Publics being more short-term, looking for jobs, looking for income, tax income, and perhaps not having that long pathway in order to make sure we have proper conservation projects. Mark, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I'm actually exercising my mind. An interesting question, what hasn't worked? Purely personally, I get a bit uncomfortable when ecosystems have an increased amount of animals, large animals imposed on them through the proliferation of water holes all over the place in order to drag animals there so people can see them. generally leads to the degradation of habitat pretty quickly.
So over-tourism.
Yeah.
Over-tourism. One's got to look very carefully at what is the real carrying capacity.
And that experience for the customers as well.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable for everyone
Yeah.
long term. And you know, one can, then what hasn't worked is, say, the huge population growth in elephants due to tourism and the demands of people wanting to see large populations of elephants. One plays God to a certain degree with what's in the toolbox to keep the elephant population down, or should it be kept down? All of these things, this is a debate that inhabits every saloon in the bushveld, and scientific papers are written about it endlessly. But the rise of tourism in southern Africa without the concurrent rise in elephant poaching has resulted in 100,000 extra elephants over and above the historical view on how many were there. And I think it has severely stressed many areas that certainly I go to, from Wangi to Okavango, Chobe. Anyone who travels through southern Africa will see areas that are ecologically devastated by this. And what does one do in the light of tourists wanting to go there? They don't want to go and see piles of dead elephants. And animal rights groups certainly would write this area off if the bullets did fly. And there hopefully will be other ways, that chemically induced ways of preventing conception will come up. Morné knows more than I do about it. But I think the glare of people's cameras being focused on wilderness areas will lead to challenges like that on ecosystems that probably for much of the year don't require the attentions of large numbers of animals, because they're dry. The dry periods ecologically require no animals for a while, and fences don't let that happen.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Morné, I think we've got time for one or two more questions. No? Can I ask one more question? I wanted just to mention your 2024 report, which you authored, and it was on your annual report with the ambitious plan to secure an additional 14 million hectares towards that 30-30 biodiversity goal. Just quickly tell us about that, because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah. So look, talk is cheap. The 14 million shortfall is what South Africa needs to get to 30% of its land surface area under some form of conservation-friendly management. That doesn't mean every hectare sits in a national park. It can also be in normal use. So WWF has in fact taken on a 5 million hectare target over the next 5 years. So by 2030, we hold ourselves responsible for an additional 5 million hectares in South Africa, coming onto better conservation management. And that includes private land, it includes community land, but of course there needs to be benefit for the people who live on that land.
That's 2.5 times the Kruger Park.
2.5 times Kruger Park.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Just to put it in context.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Well, listen, we've run out of time, but what an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much. Can everybody show their appreciation
Thank you.
to Mark
Johnny.
Reid and
Thank you, Jonathan.
Dr. Morné.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, David.